Being a homeowner and having a wet basement is certainly one of the most unenjoyable experiences that you ever could have. So what we run into all the time are ways that people take upon themselves in order to resolve the problem. You can see they put tar on this wall. It's the right idea, but it's the wrong side of the wall. The water that fills up on the outside of the wall is what absorbs into your concrete. You put a concrete block in a pan of water, you come back hours later, you'll notice that the watermark is way above the water line in the pan, because the water will absorb into the concrete. The concrete will actually pull the water up out of the pan. Apply that to this particular scenario. You got water in your backfill, standing there up against there probably was some type of waterproofing on the outside of the wall. If you do tar on the outside in a can on a shelf, it probably has about a 7-year lifespan. In the ground with Mother Nature working on it, it might get 3 to 5 before it's really broken down and not all that useful. But you have the water building up, and once that deteriorates, that tar or whatever the waterproofing is deteriorates, and it always does, then you have standing water under pressure, meaning filling up, and when water gets higher, it pushes between the undisturbed soil in the area and the dirt that was dug up and then replaced, which we call backfill. It's much softer than the existing soil, and that's what water collects, and it sits there. So you have standing water, and that water's heavy, so it creates pressure up against your bare, porous concrete walls. And those walls will absorb that water. It'll pull the water in and then evaporate. Naturally, it would evaporate into your basement. You would much rather have a wall breathe than to put tar on it. Once you put tar on the wall, it breaks down the concrete much quicker if you lock the water into the walls and not let the walls breathe with tar. I've used this scenario before. If you had 2 cinder blocks and you walked down to a stream and you took one and you threw it out in the middle of the stream and it was a nice flowing stream, and you took the other one and you dropped it into a 55-gallon drum, but if you came back a couple of years later and you went out and got the block that was in the moving water, where water was able to pass through it, that block would probably be really close to the condition of the day that you threw it in. The block that was sitting in the standing water would be much more brittle. It'd be a much weaker block. That's the scenario that you get when you put tar on the walls. So you get a good heavy storm, and we have a good sized hill on the back of this property, so they get, in a good heavy rain, a lot of water coming down and filling up that backfill, so they get a strong false water table. A false water table is the entire reason you get water in your basement. When that pressure builds up and you have a scenario where you've locked water into the walls, you could get a crack from the pressure building up on the outside of your walls. And then what this also does is, when water absorbs into your walls, it pulls a little bit of the soil on the outside into the concrete. And the soil in the Northeast is notorious for having a little bit of an acidic quality to it. Concrete is made out of sand and stone, and lime's the adhesive. It's the glue that holds the sand and stone together. Acid is opposite of lime. When you put the two together, they neutralize. The level of acid in your soil is very low. But over time, it gets pulled into your walls, and it sits there. Another storm comes, a little bit more gets pulled into your walls. You get a dry period. Somehow your walls dry out from the outside, and because it can't do it from the inside because of the tar. But over time, you get considerable times when that acid is pulled into your walls. We call that an acid load, and it works to deteriorate. So over time, you can get some pretty significant deterioration to that lime, which is the glue that holds your sand and stone together. So it's a weakening of your walls. Here's the thing. This is a really bad idea, although it's understandable and it makes sense, and you would think of it logically if you didn't know the backstory on how concrete is put together and the backfill area and the false water table. If you knew all that, you'd never ever want to do this. So from a do-it-yourselfer standpoint, this should be avoided at all costs. I would really appreciate it if you could hit the like button and subscribe. And until next time, enjoy your dry basement.